Welcome to the 700 Club. A warning from the UN nuclear agency. Iran has removed more than 24 surveillance cameras from its nuclear sites and could be just weeks away from producing a nuclear weapon.
Iran continues to be a persistent threat to Israel and other countries in the region. Now Congress is taking steps to help those nations defend themselves. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
The UN chief nuclear monitor called removing the cameras a serious challenge.
Let's hope that emotions, go down a little bit and that we focus again on the problems, because the problems are not disappearing. And if we add to the problems less visibility, less access to the agency, then I don't think we are solving anything. We are aggravating everything.
Even before the cameras were turned off, 30 nations voted to censure Iran after the agency discovered nuclear activities at 3 undeclared sites. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett praised the response.
We see in this decision, on the one hand, the lies and hypocrisy of Iran in the nuclear context and in general. And on the other hand, we see here the correct standing of the countries of the world in distinguishing between good and evil when they say clearly Iran is concealing things.
Bennett's statement came just before meeting with the UAE's Crown Prince, where Iran likely topped their agenda. In the meantime, the IAEA says Iran plans to increase its uranium enrichment with more advanced centrifuges, approaching weapons-grade levels. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers from both parties signed onto legislation regarding Iran's latest moves.
The Defend Act directs the Secretary of Defense to seek to cooperate with allies and partners to identify an architecture and acquisition approach to an integrated air and missile defense system.
Iran's growing missile and drone capabilities are seen as a regional threat.
Many of our allies in the region have missile defense capabilities, whether it's Patriot systems or other things, in Israel with the Iron Dome system, but they aren't integrated. We need to bring those together, and it is U.S. leadership.
As members of the Abraham Accords caucus, the sponsors believe the legislation builds on the agreements.
The key to the Abraham Accords and this new relationship that was fostered through the last administration is really about recognizing between Arab and Jewish states that Iran is the common threat.
The head of the IAEA says if this pace continues, it would be a matter of just a few weeks before Iran could get sufficient material needed for a nuclear weapon. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And if it acquires a nuclear weapon, it is the ultimate in destabilization for the region. They now can put at threat Saudi Arabia, all the other oil-producing nations, and then their main target, Israel, and has been for decades. They're the major funder of terrorism in the region, and they then, once they're through with Israel, their next target is you and me, the United States. They call us the Great Satan. Well, in other news, members of Congress reached a bipartisan deal outlining legislation on gun restrictions. Ephraim Graham has more on that story from our CBN newsroom. Ephraim?
Gordon, 10 Republican and 10 Democrat senators signed off on the plan, which contains expanding background checks to include juvenile records for gun buyers under the age of 21. Funding for states to implement and administer red flag laws restricting those convicted of domestic violence and strengthening school security and mental health programs. President Biden described the agreement as important steps in the right direction, even though it falls short of his call to ban assault weapons or raise the age limit to buy them. The framework now has to be turned into legislation. Any bill would need 10 Republican votes to pass in the Senate. I want to take a closer look now at red flag laws aimed at removing guns from the hands of people who may pose a danger to themselves or others. Bipartisan support for such measures has been growing over the years. As Tara Merzner reports, the recent attacks in New York and Texas are spurring lawmakers to action.
The charge led by Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut.
We have another Sandy Hook on our hands.
And Texas Senator John Cornyn.
We need to do a lot more than we have done in the past.
A red flag law would permit police, family members, medical professionals, and others to petition a state court to order the temporary removal of firearms from someone believed to be a danger to themselves or others. According to a recent Justice Department report, people who commit mass shootings are nearly always in a state of crisis at the time of the attack and often leak their plans.
About 80% of mass shooters in some way broadcast their intentions in advance. They tell people they know, or they talk trash on the internet.
Red flag laws already exist in 19 states. Most of those passed after the 2018 mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida. The state has used the protective order nearly 9,000 times since then. Unlike most gun measures, more Republicans appear open to red flag laws.
There are more Republicans at the table talking about changing our gun laws and investing in mental health than at any time since Sandy Hook.
In 2019, former President Trump pushed them following shootings in El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio.
That is why I have called for red flag laws, also known as extreme risk protection orders.
Red flag laws have become an increasingly effective tool in preventing these shootings, as well as suicides and deadly domestic violence.
Red flag law, we know those things work.
Experts agree, however, they're not foolproof. New York's law did not stop a shooter from killing 10 people at a Buffalo grocery store last month. Nor, some insist, would it have stopped the Uvalde school shooter. Donnell Harvin, a senior policy researcher at Rand Corporation, says a federal gun registry would help keep people from falling through the cracks.
If one state has a red flag law and an individual purchases a gun in another state and then moves to that state, there's not necessarily a trail that this individual owns a gun. So while they may be flagged as an individual who needs support, maybe crisis type of support from a psychosocial standpoint, that may not necessarily come up in any database per se that they own a gun.
Research suggests red flags do make a difference. According to one study, for every 10 to 20 firearms removed in Connecticut, a life is saved. In California, there have been at least 21 cases when a red flag law disarmed people threatening mass shootings. Skeptics, though, remain on both sides, with gun rights supporters arguing they punish law-abiding people.
The order has to be issued, but still, this is a gun confiscation law.
And the ACLU insisting the process must be fair to those affected. Regardless, whatever gun measures the senators possibly come up with would need 60 votes to overcome a filibuster to get a vote for the bill. Meanwhile, some states, including West Virginia, maintain red flag laws will not be coming to their state. In Washington, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Turning now to the economic crisis hitting the country, costs still going up on everything from food to gasoline. AAA reports the national average for a gallon of gas now tops $5. Friday's Consumer Price Index showed inflation is up 8.6% over a year ago, and grocery prices are up nearly 12% from this time last year. Over the weekend, President Biden told a group of Democrats, quote, "We're going to live with this inflation for a while." Economist Larry Summers, who served as Treasury Secretary under President Bill Clinton, told CNN the high prices could tip the economy into a recession.
I think given where we've gotten to, it's more likely than not that we'll have a recession within the next 2 years.
The Federal Reserve is expected to raise key interest rates by a half point Wednesday in its effort to try and cool inflation. Turning overseas now to the war in Ukraine. Russian forces continue to take new ground in the east. The fight for the city of Severodonetsk is now going street to street. The Ukrainians, outnumbered and outgunned, are pulling out of some areas. President Zelensky says the Russians have deployed 7 tactical battalion groups to the city, and they have 10 times more firepower than Ukrainian forces. Zelensky repeating a dire warning to the West, saying Russia is eyeing more parts of Europe and Ukraine is just the first step. European nations are among opening their arms to refugees escaping the war, especially Poland, where more than 3.5 million Ukrainians have fled. One family prayed to God for direction after they crossed the border and found shelter and comfort at a home supported by CBN Ministries.
When I heard the sound of the explosions, it felt like someone was attacking my heart. Didn't know what it was, but I panicked.
A friend texted Anya saying Russians had invaded Ukraine. She didn't believe it until the attack continued.
I heard the sound of the rockets, and I was afraid that the bomb was going to destroy our home and kill us all. It was horrible.
While her father had to stay behind, Anya fled the war-torn country with her mother and sister. When they arrived in Poland, they didn't know where to go.
I prayed to Jesus and God the Creator for our safety. I knew that He would rescue our family.
God heard their cry for help, and Anya's family landed here at this refugee home, which is supported by Operation Blessing and Orphans Promise.
I'm so thankful to God that we arrived here unharmed. He answered my prayer. The moment we got here, all my fear and panic went away. I'm so grateful for the people of God who have helped us.
Operation Blessing and Orphans Promise are sheltering many Ukrainian families just like Anya's at this refugee home. From traumatized children to heartbroken parents and grandparents, everyone is being supported and loved here.
Praise God we're safe here, and we have food and other things we need here. I would like to thank all the donors and volunteers who have come forward to help and support us.
In all the pain, it is such a blessing to be an answer to someone's prayer. Gordon?
And you are that answer. If you're a member of the 700 Club, a portion of your gift went into that work. If you're not a member, I encourage you to join with us. All you have to do is call us, 1-800-700-7000, and say, I want to be a member of the 700 Club.